Okay, hey everybody. This is Mark from Circle the Dark Mother. I have James and Brandon here with me, and we are going to go through all of the Lilith books we have collectively, and I have broken them up into types to some degree, and so we'll start going through. And Marcy already mentioned one I don't have called Witch Lilith. Totally amazes me because I have 52 here to go through, and I don't have that. So another one to put on the list. Now I'm going to go through these based on what kind of Lilith book they are. I will tell you that we only included, for the most part, books that are completely about her, although we have a small group that it's a lot of information on her, even though it's not completely her. And any fiction books has to really be Lilith, not just the name, because I've been suckered into buying a whole bunch of books that say Lilith, and then you get into them and it's not really her. So it's at least to some degree her. So we're going to go pretty fast. You can ask questions, jump in. This is going to be totally informal. I know Brandon and James will jump in with ones they know. So the first one I'm going to start with fiction. We're going to save the really good stuff to last. The fiction books, some of them are really good, though. The first one is Lilith by George Mcdonald. It's a classic. I think it was written in like the late 1800s. Is that right? He was a peer of C.S. Lewis. It is quite a bit about Lilith. There's also other information in it, and totally fiction. The only difficulty with it is written in that Victorian kind of language. So it is a little hard to wade through because of the language, but definitely worth reading. Just really interesting way of looking at Lilith. I've read it a long time ago, but I remember I felt like sad for her in the book to a degree, which is not how I usually feel, but it was a good read. And I'm going to go fairly fast because we got a lot of these, as I said. So the next one is called The Book of Lilith. This is by Robert G. Brown. And this book is set up like it's a gospel or a myth, like it was written by Lilith. And I'll tell you, it's really, really good. It's a little different than I picture it, but it talks about Lilith, Adam, Eve, and it ends up being Lilith and Eve are sort of, I don't want to say enemies, but they're definitely at odds. But in the end, and I don't want to spoil it, but at the same time, I think it's important. Lilith starts to understand Eve and starts to really feel for her. And it goes beyond that, but I won't spoil it completely. But really good. This is one of my favorites of the more fictional portrayals. The next one is another one along the same vein called The Gospel According to Lilith by Lonnie Hicks. I didn't enjoy it as much as the Book of Lilith because it takes more liberties in the story. And it goes places I don't really see the Midrash going, but it was still interesting and I still enjoyed it. Probably not, as I said, my favorite of all time books, especially fiction. I really liked George McDonald's book and the Book of Lola a lot better.
You know what's weird about some of these Lilith books? Like, I always find that the male authors, for some reason, seem to write a little bit more and have a little bit more material on Lilith.
That's true.
The women authors tend to write more experiential things, like personal gnosis things on Lilith.
That's very true. As we look through these, what James said, I hopefully you could hear him. I know the mic isn't the greatest on this, but he's saying that a lot of the women authors are more experiential about what they write, and a lot of the men authors tend to be a little more verbose. I've seen that the male authors tend to also write more of history.
Academia.
Yeah, more academic type stuff, which is fine. But a lot of the female writers tend to be more about how she relates to them. Not always in both cases. There are some academic, women writers, and there are some experiential men. But I agree, that is a trend. The next book I have not read yet, but it needs to be mentioned. And so it's called Myth, The Origin of Man. I know it doesn't sound like a Lilith book, but it's by Aaron Steiner. He has a group on YouTube called, I think it's Children of Lilith or Lilith's Children or something like that. He took the writings of Zechariah Stitchin, which I don't know if any of you know who he is. He took Sumerian tablets, translated them, and he was sort of a UFO Chariots of the Gods kind of writer. Some of his stuff is interesting, but he takes some liberties with the text I struggle with. He talks about this idea that there's a 10th planet, which now we know there's way more than that in the Kuiper Belt. But he talks about this planet that comes every 3,000 or 30,000 years, I think. And this guy sort of took that and turned it into a myth, and Lilith plays a huge part of it. I want to read this as fiction. This guy seems to imply it's actual reality, and it's a little out there for my taste. But I do want to read it for the fictional standpoint. He mixes a lot of South American and Sumerian stuff together, and not saying that there can't be interpretations there, but what I've read so far on Facebook is a little bit, I question some of it, but at the same time, it sounds interesting. So, who am I to judge? I'm going to read it.
Yeah.
This is one I really thought was okay. It's called Adam's First Wife, the Saga of Lilith. Again, my problem with this one, not problem, it was well written. It's by Darlene Nankin. I obviously don't have Dauphin, Dauphin,
Yeah.
It was okay, but again, I've read so much of the myth, so much of the stories from the Midrash, Jewish Midrash, and this takes a lot of liberties with that and sort of goes way off script into ways that were interesting, but I struggled a little, but it was well written. So I think it's worth reading, just not really my cup of tea. Lilith by Lazaro H. This is another one. It's a very big book, as you can see. There's a lot of pages, and it's again one where Lilith is the main character, and it is Lilith, but it has gone far from the original stories. I don't mean to say that that's bad. It's just, for me, there's a lot of suspending my disbelief because I know the stories so well. But as a book, it was good. I have not read this one yet. It is called I Am Lilith, an epic reimaging of the story of Lilith, a novel by Melanie Dufty. This is again one that, from what I can tell, it is fiction, and it's a retelling of her myth. And again, it seems to go pretty far from the Midrash. I haven't read it yet, though, so I can't really comment. It looks interesting, but it also does look more of a fictional creation. Then I'm going to cover two that are very interesting, but in no way do I consider these, what's the word I'm looking for, historic or accurate. So one is called Revelations of a Dark Mother, and the other one is called The Book of Nod. These are actually retelling of Lilith and Cain's stories, but it's based on the role-playing game Vampire the Masquerade. Some people have taken these and tried to use them as spiritual stuff. Now, there's metaphor in them, and they're actually interesting. They're very well done. I've read a lot because I was in a LARP years and years ago, a vampire LARP, just for fun. And one of my characters was actually a Lilith devotee, shocking. And so I did get these and read them, and they're very well done. Very much modern mythology, but totally just made up. And Lilith's the first vampire. She turns Cain, and that's the mark of Cain. Again, it does not fit any history anywhere, but they're very well done. The last couple, one is poetry. So Lilith, The Legend of the First Woman by Ada Langworthy Collier is really, really good. It's a poem, it's poetry, I mean, and it's very good. And again, this is an older classic that's been around for a long time. I think I have 2 or 3 different covers of it, but really great poetry. And then the next 2 are anthologies. Lilith, Queen of the Desert by Anya Kless.
Yeah.
And then the second one is Lilith Unbound by Elaine Cunningham. These are both short stories with Lilith as the subject. But they really are, and there's also poems in Queen of the Desert.
Mhm.
Lilith Unbound, there's some really, really good work that's based on scholarship of the stories from the Midrash, from Sumerian stuff. There's one which is her and Eve that I just really touched me very heavily. And then there's like one where she's in space that I could not connect to at all. But in general, especially Lilith Unbound, really, really good books. So that takes us out of fiction. Any comments or anything anybody wanted to say about that? Okay, the next is a small pile, and it's focused on astrology and tarot. So the first one is called the Lilith Bible Tarot Deck by Lorelei Douglas. And there is a tarot deck too. The book you can get on Amazon. You can't get the cards there. You have to go to a website where they print the cards and sell them. It's basically a game website is how she set it up. I got to tell you, I love this. I wasn't sure when I first heard Bible Tarot, but the reason it's called Bible Tarot is she took a lot of Torah stuff, imagery and ideas, and put it into her tarot. Things like the tower is the Tower of Babel. The world is Shekinah, which is God's presence and power, which is the mother and daughter in Kabbalah.
The women's stories she uses are amazing.
Yes.
Like we don't always remember all the women from the Bible.
Yeah.
But she remembers Asenath and all of these obscure women.
Yeah.
And really is able to tell the tarot story utilizing these women from the Bible.
And she does have some of the men, like Adam's in there. I think it's not some. Well, Samael's in there, but the devil is
Azazel.
And just does a great job. In the book, she ties the card to a story, a biblical story or a midrashic story, then has the imagery, which I think she did all the artwork, and then she ties in the tarot information, and it is really good. This is one of my favorites.
I use it every day for on my altar as my tarot deck, and it's very clear.
Well, and I love too for the wands, which are stabs, the swords. She actually uses for the page. She uses for that one she uses bat, doesn't she? So house, which is a feminine archetype. And then for the knight, she uses Ben, which is the sun. So she uses all the tarot type stuff. And I'll throw down a couple cards here just to give you a picture. Let's see. This is, I think this one is this is the Lovers. And this might be Azazel. I think it is the devil. So just really interesting. And the book is really good without the cards, but then the cards make it awesome.
Yeah, they're so clear with
They are.
what they say, so it's good.
And I've done readings with them and it's worked really, really well. So that is a favorite. There are two then that are more about astrology. So Living Lilith. which is 4 dimensions of the cosmic feminine. It's actually about 4 different astrologic areas, the Lilith and some of the other stuff, using that to look at feminine aspects of us. Very well done, but very focused on astrology. So if you don't want to read about astrology, don't get it. But if you want to see that tied into Lilith, it's good. And then Lilith and Astrology and the Shadow Self, by the Astrology Vixen. Not sure who that is, but I got to say, this one is pretty good because it's about Lilith and astrology and also working with the shadow self. And so it's very similar to Living Lilith from the idea of the astrology piece, but they really get into shadow work, and it's well done. And I'm not usually an astrology book person. Not that I'm against it, it's just not my strong suit. You know, it's not the part I'm really good at. Okay, any comments? There's only 3 of those. Anything anybody wanted to talk about with those? Okay, the next ones are feminine, divine feminine or women's studies books. Lilith, Keepers of the Flame by Mary Blue. Very much about Lilith as an archetype for women. Really well done. It's really about the idea of getting our spirituality back through the divine feminine. Really enjoyed it, and thought it was, you know, I'm not a woman, obviously, but I obviously am into the divine feminine, and thought it was also very good at helping everyone to see the divine feminine piece of themselves and how that's super important. And I love the artwork on the cover, just as a side note. The next one is Welcoming Lilith, Awakening and Welcoming Pure Female Power by Teresa C. Dintino, I think is how you pronounce it. I really like this book. Again, it's very divine feminine. It's about women reclaiming their truth and who they are, not being ashamed of their sexuality, not being ashamed of using their power. Very much speaking to women, but I still thought it was really, really good.
Yeah,
when I say still thought, I don't mean that can't be good. It's just, even though I'm a guy, it still touched me. Go ahead, Brandon.
Oh yeah, it is. It's good.
Yeah, it is. It's just really good. The next one's interesting because it's Lilith, The Power of the Woman's Spirit in the Age of Aquarius by Ed Russo. And it is very much a feminist book. And again, using the female spirit for everybody. I would say I think I like the other 2 better, but it's still well done. It was definitely worth reading. And then the last one of these is Original Resistance, Reclaiming Lilith, Reclaiming Ourselves. And it's called a Girl God Anthology. And it's edited by a couple people. I'll push the names up because I don't have my glasses on. So this is the one I enjoyed the least because it was less about Lilith specifically and more about feminism and women's studies. Very well done, very well thought out, but it's also a lot of people talking. So it's like one short article after another. And again, powerful, but since I'm really focused on Lilith, some of it wasn't as Lilithy, and being a guy too, maybe some of it wasn't as relevant for me, but it was well done. So again, another good book. And you're not going to hear many that I dislike. Even though I have my own sort of vision of Lilith and the way I work with her, I don't think I have the corner on it or am the expert. I think everybody is their own. And so I really enjoy reading other people's ideas, whether they are my way of looking or not. Okay. I'm going to go next into sort of the history / working with Lilith. I think these are. Hold on 1 second. I think these were actually in 2 piles, but let's just go forward. And these are in no particular order. So first, what am I going to do but plug my own book? Embracing Lilith by me. I like it. Obvious, it's my view. It's got a lot of Kabbalah. It is a little bit of a fiction and a nonfiction because it's got the history. Then it goes into taking the myths from the Torah and from extra biblical sources and putting it together into a story. And then, of course, it ends with practice and people's personal experience. So I think it's good. Everybody can make their own judgment.
I love it.
Oh, thank you. Have to then go to Michael Hirkis's book, The Glam Witch, which Glam stands for Great I don't know why I can't pronounce this, Lilithian Arcane Mysteries. Michael's a great guy. I love hearing him talk. He and I have a very different way of working with Lilith. He's more traditional witchcraft, slash, he's not Wiccan, but it's got a little bit of Wiccan elements. But he loves Lilith, absolutely. And there's a lot of good stuff in there about, different kinds of magic to do, different correspondences. He's got history in there and his personal stuff. We always, when we talk, it's pretty funny because I would never use pink for Lilith. And he thinks pink is like her main color. And this is where I say Lilith is so diverse that she can be anything based on what you need. And so he really, if you know Michael or follow him on Facebook or Instagram, he's very glam. He makeup and hair and outfits that are just stunning. That's not my side of things. And again, no criticism either way. I think it's awesome. But Lilith has become this muse for him to be the best him, where Lilith has become my muse to be the best me. And that's obviously going to be very different. But Michael's great. He loves Lilith. And it's a really well done book, looking at her from a different perspective. The next one is a weird one because it's called Lilith, Queen of Demons by Gillian Mcdonald. And I'll tell you, when I first saw this book, I thought I was going to hate it because, I obviously, I know that she's considered the Queen of Demons in a lot of the Midrash and such. But typically, when that is the title of a book, they usually go pretty hard on her. This book doesn't. It's got a lot of great research. The author, Gillian Mcdonald, did an amazing job of researching Lilith, stuff I didn't know after 20 years of studying her. So this is actually one of my go-to books. I did not have it when I wrote Embracing Lilith, which I'm sort of glad because I probably would have taken ideas from it because it's so good. But this is one that I think is one of the best. Hey, we're working through books, so more to come. So then Lilith, Healing the Wild by Tom Jacobs. This is another history book, very much talking about history of Lilith through different, different Midrash, through Sumerian stuff. Of course, a lot of them use the famous relief that many claim is not Lilith anymore. They call it Queen of the Night, but a lot of people say it's either Ishtar or it's Ereshkigal. And the hard part is Ereshkigal, Ishtar, Lilith, all of their symbology is very similar. There are reasons to believe it still could be Lilith, even though they say it's not, the owls being one of them. But there's a lot of reasons to say it could be Ereshkigal too. The next one is called Lilith's Cave by Howard Schwartz. And it says it's selected and retold by. So what it is it's really a bunch of Jewish tales of the supernatural with Lilith as one of the main topics. Lot of referencing Midrash stories, different Jewish myth, and really well done.
I love this book. If you want to know where they come up with her being the Queen of Sheba and all these different characters, this is the book, and it's Jewish fairy tales. All Jewish people are familiar with these basic tales of the supernatural. And it's really great to see where they pull out her history from and what she means to them.
Really good. This is one of my favorites too. The next one is very more scholarly, in my opinion. It's Lilith, the First Eve, Historical and Psychologic Aspects of the Dark Feminine by Sigmund Horowitz. And so they take a lot of the Lilith iconography, myth, and it also goes into psychology. Interesting, First Eve, I know a lot of people haven't heard that, but in some Midrash, it actually calls Lilith the First Eve and Eve the Second Eve. Because the word in Hebrew is actually Hava, not Eve, and it means first. It can be taken as mother.
It's the root of the word love.
Yeah. So that name is really important, and the fact that they take the information and tied to psychology, which Kabbalah is a lot of psychology, so it's well done. Lilith, From Ancient Lore to Modern Culture by E.R. Werner. It's pretty good. It's got a lot of history, and it goes then into some of the modern references to her, because she's everywhere now, as you've probably seen. She's in like every supernatural show on TV. She was in Lucifer. She was in Supernatural. She's in why am I going blank? Sabrina.
Yeah.
She's in everything. So it goes through the history of Lilith, and it's well done. It's not as detailed as some of the others. I really like this one, The Book of Lilith by Lilix Rowe, but I call it the pamphlet of Lilith because it's a very, very, very small book. I think it's 30-some pages, and it's big type. But it tells a little bit about Lilith, and it talks about how she really is love, not the evil that has been made into her, that she's been characterized with. And it's really well done. I love the ideas, but it's just the only negative I'd say is it's not fleshed out enough. As I said, it's the pamphlet of Lilith. I love it. I just wish she would have written more. Lilith, the Mother of Dark Creatures by E.R. Werner Corvus Nocturnum. It's good, but it's more from a darker perspective. If you've ever read Michael Ford does the foreword, and some of his stuff is pretty dark, so it really is a darker take on her history. But again, it's a good book. It's another one I'm really happy I have. The Book of Lilith by Barbara Black Koltov, PhD. This is an exception to where we said a lot of the women did more of their experience. This is more, from what I remember of it, it's more scholarly, but with a little bit of experiential stuff in it. But very, very scholarly and well done.
I love the artwork.
I do too. I love all the art. You look at this stuff. Pagan Portals, The First Sisters, Lilith and Eve by Lady Kate Ashton. Like this book, but there are some very pagan views, not really going into some of the Kabbalistic views. Again, not that I'm criticizing that. And I like the book. It's just less focused on stuff that I guess I focus on. But it's a good book. It's definitely a different perspective, which I really, really love. It's why I like Michael's book, because it's so different from what I really usually do and how I learned Lilith, that it gives me this perspective that I have to take note of because it's different. And that's important for me. The Screech Owl, The Lie Behind Lilith by G.P. Haggart. It basically goes through and takes a whole bunch of the stories from the Bible or the Torah, and in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and you see a lot of appearances. The thing being that Lilith is actually not directly mentioned in the Bible. There's translations that use her name, but one of them is more probably Screech Owl is the translation. And then there's a place where it talks about a group of different kinds of dark entities, and it mentions her name, but not as an individual. It's using more of the Sumerian idea of the Lilin.
As a collection of spirits.
Yes, exactly. But she is indirectly mentioned in these texts, and also in, she is mentioned in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and she is indirectly mentioned, of course, with Genesis 1, where God creates man and woman in his image. And then we get to Genesis 2, where all of a sudden he's pulling Eve out of Adam, and the translation is out of his rib. This was okay. It was well done for what they did, but it's pretty short. And I guess I saw it more as just trying to look at verses and trying to make assumptions through them. So good, but there's others that are more detailed. Lilith's Fire, Rebecca Gren Scott, Reclaiming Our Sacred Life Force. This is interesting because it's really sort of looking at Lilith and Kundalini, which is absolutely a good reading of it, of Lilith. Some Gnostics talk about her as being part of the fire snake, which is Kundalini from an Eastern tradition. And this really talks about us regaining our fire and reclaiming who we really are. I really like this one. And then there's one called the Lilith Monographs, Volume 1. I haven't been able to find Volume 2, called Immaculata. And hopefully I'm not butchering that, by Joshua Seraphim. I didn't love it, to be blunt. It seemed a little bit hodgepodgey-ish. But again, it's Lilith, so I certainly was happy to read it, and glad it's in my collection. But it's maybe not as focused as I would like. And then the last one in this category is Lilith, the Ghost in the Garden, Concealed and Revealed by Dr. John Pelazani. This one is very much just Bible verses over and over again. And it's very short. It's, again, almost pamphlet size, 71 pages with a salvation prayer and bibliography. And it really is weird because in some ways it's pro-Lilith and negative Lilith at the same time. And I don't quite know how you manage that, but this author did. Again, I'm glad I have it. I'm glad I read it. Probably not my first recommendation for somebody getting into Lilith books. Okay. The next set are the darker books on Lilith. And then the last set after that are the ones where she's mentioned at times, or she's a predominant part of the book, but not the only part. Lilith, the Dark Feminine Archetype by Temple of the Ascending Flame is one that a lot of people really love. I liked it, but it does take Lilith as a very, very dark entity. Temple of the Ascending Flame, would you guys say that's Luciferian?
Yeah.
And Luciferian stuff's interesting. It's very Gnostic, but they tend to see a lot of deities as masks, which means almost like parts of our personality. Not disagreeing that that's part of how it works, but they sometimes get a little fixated in that. This book didn't. And so I liked it a lot better than some of the Temple of the Ascending Flame books, because it really did do a good job of doing a very dark Lilith. And I think that's an aspect you can't ignore. It's not really where I work with her, but
it's an essential book to read if you're really devoted. But likewise, my experience was the same.
Yeah, it was good.
It's good.
It's not my favorite because it's a little darker than I like to go usually, but it's good. The next one, I'm actually going to show you two covers because I got confused and bought the same book twice because of different covers. It's The Magic of Lilith by Codman. He is a very, very, very prolific writer. He has like 50 books out there at least. The only thing I have against this book is, again, its shortness.
Short.
It's very, very short. You can see.
I know, you can tell he's a scholar and you want more.
Yes, he's really good because he looks at the dark and the bright. He's done books on different, he's done demons in quotes,
Ghosts.
and in fact, I think there's another book in here by him in the Lilith's mentioned but not complete. He's done stuff on Sumerian magic. Very well read, very well grounded scholar that has really done a good job of essentializing. And there is magical practice in these, which is well done. So if it was longer, it would probably be at one of the top of my list.
Yeah.
But it's not longer, so, but it's good. The next couple are all based in the Qliphoth, which if you know Kabbalah, the Qliphoth is the dark side. It's the tree of shadows or the tree of death, or the tree of knowledge of good and evil versus the tree of life. So these are all based on that Qliphoth. So again, very dark, but very, very important if you do anything with the Qliphoth. Lilith, Goddess of the Citrahara by Black Tower Publishing is really well done. I think it takes all of the darker Midrash, all of the darker ideas, and does a really good job of not making it come out as she's this evil monster.
I love the sigils in it too.
Yes, they do a whole bunch of sigils. And they use different names for her and then rituals. For the darker Qliphotic stuff, this is probably my favorite. That's all about her. And then we have the Tree of Shadows, which is, of course, the dark tree. They're by Damon
Barzee.
Barzee. The first one is the Tree of Shadows, Volume 1, Lilith, the Woman of the Night, which is the first sphere of the Qliphoth, corresponding to Malkut in the Tree of Life. And it's called Lilith. And Ne'ama is the goddess of it. And this is really well done of giving you insight into the Qliphoth. It's not very long, but it's only one sphere. So if you think about it, if you're going to do the whole tree, it's a pretty big book. But again, really interesting if you want to learn a little bit about Qliphoth. The next one is the Tree of Shadows, Volume 2, Gamaliel, the obscene one. And this is the second, corresponding to Yesod. And this is Lilith as the parts of fame. An obscene one, obviously, the Tree of Shadows and the people that work with it exclusively tend to really love to go for shock value. The obscene one is really the idea of breaking all the things that we don't do or we are afraid to do because we're not being ourselves. So it's about obscene from the standpoint of things that we would rather hide, but we really need to deal with.
Unchained is the best way to say it.
Yes, and really good. Again, this is very helpful if you're into, if you want to learn anything about the Qliphoth. I don't have volume 3 through, I assume they do Dayat through 11.
I've not seen them.
I haven't either. I don't know if they haven't come out yet, but I don't have them because I really only cared about, I have other books on the Qliphoth, and I only wanted the deep dives into the Lilith ones. The next one is a very controversial book called Liber Lilith by Donald Tyson. The first thing is, this is the second edition. The first edition is selling for what, thousands of dollars on eBay? I mean, I'm not kidding, thousands of dollars. I got this second edition cheap for like $90. The second edition is going for over $100 most of the time. And I will say it was interesting, but I don't think it was worth $90. It's divided into two parts. One part is supposed to be Gnostic myths of Lilith. They don't appear anywhere else, so I don't know if this author channeled them, made them up, or got them from somewhere, but I like it. the myth is good.
Mhm.
There's a lot of bringing Kabbalah and Lilith and Gnosticism together. The other half, though, is I don't know if it's really this Donald Tyson or if it's somebody else or it's just made up, but it's this guy's experiences supposedly with Lilith and all these things he does and that she supposedly tells him to do. I don't resonate with one word of it.
I mean, not one
word. He shaves off all his body hair and he does all these sexual practices.
And we're men.
I know, it just was weird.
So I think all three of the men in this room are devoted to Lilith. I mean, you have to say that if we have no recollection of it at all, it's odd.
And again, maybe this guy, I always think Lilith is who you need her to be. And maybe this is what he needed to go toward his realization. But I could have done without reading it, to be truthful. I love the Gnostic part. Don't like the supposed story of this guy's life.
Yeah.
It seemed a little bit not good for women. And because the way he was using sex, and to me, Lilith just doesn't do that. So again, I don't want to go down on somebody else's experience, but it wasn't something I cared about. The Gnostic part's great. If I could have gotten it for maybe $35, the second half would have been well worth it, maybe more than that. But 90, if I cut the book in half, I'd like it a lot better. The next one is Lilith, Her Masks, Rites, and Manifestations by Damon Barzee again. Damon Barzee. This one's pretty good. I think they do go into different aspects of Lilith, but you hear the word masks. Again, this is Luciferian, and they're getting to this idea that it's really our psychologic makeup. Again, Kabbalah says that too, but they also say that they're more like collective entities, not just my mask, but everybody's. So I, again, didn't quite resonate as much with this one as I did his other books, but it's good. It's just not my top. Devotions to Lilith by Byron Griffin. The symbol on the front is actually the astrological Lilith symbol. It's a lot of devotions. It's a lot of somebody's prayers and devotionals. Well done. But again, it's sort of short, and it's like huge print. So if you look at this, I mean, look how big the print is, and lots of blank space. So it's another pamphlet of Lilith, but it's interesting. I tend to write my own devotions, but it was interesting to see somebody else's. Rite of Lilith, which is by John F. And it's the name is sort of smeared, so I'm having trouble reading it. Richalicki the third. Didn't love it. It's like a big, it's one long rite. There's some good pieces of commentary in between, but it's way too detailed in a way I don't work. So again, glad to have it, but I'm never going to do the rite in there. Somebody else may want to, but wasn't really my thing. He also uses Jehovah a lot, which is the English version of the Latin name of the Hebrew word Yahweh. And so as somebody who has that background in Hebrew religion, I found it a little bit modern, like not that I'm against modern stuff, but it wasn't really, again, resonating. And like the rite goes on and on and on. It's a lot, and it's well done for what it is. But they talk about the Black Kabbalah and this huge rite. Pieces of it were really interesting, but there were pieces I just didn't care. But again, not knocking it, just not really my thing. This one is called Working with Lilith and Other Dark Forces of the Night by Alexander Newman. This really is a pamphlet, and it's 8 pages. It's way too short way too focused on just getting power out of Lilith. It's not horribly done, but it's just so, and it's satanic, not even Gnostic or Luciferian. And again, I'm not knocking Satanism. I know Satanists, different kinds. There's the ones that are more like atheists. There's the ones that are spiritual Gnostic Satanists. And then there's more of the, I would say, more fundamentalist Satanists that, you know, it's sort of the against God kind of thing. This is more that. It's interesting, but I didn't really get anything out of it. And this is the last of this one. And this is a book I will tell you not to buy. It's called The Case for Lilith, 23 Biblical Evidences Identifying the Serpent as Adam's First Failed Wife in Genesis by Mark Wayne Biggs. And based on The Case for Lilith, I thought it was going to be a case for why Lilith is good. It's not. I don't want to make assumptions, but Mr. Biggs seems like he may be a fundamentalist. He makes a case for the idea that Lilith was created by Lucifer. Understand that in Hebrew terms, Lucifer didn't exist. Samiel was the dark masculine, and Lilith's consort after Adam. Lucifer is actually a Greco-Roman god who was then identified based on a translation of the New Testament into the word Lucifer, because Lucifer was the morning Venus, where Aphrodite is the evening Venus. So he's also a solar type deity of light, and he turns him into complete evil, that he makes Lilith out of gas, which is nowhere to be found. And what I really don't like about it is the fact that he does exegesis on biblical passages and uses words that are in one place and translates them differently in another place. Same exact word. And it doesn't make sense. But his case is that Lilith is the mother of all people who are evil. And if you're descended from her, you are destined to be evil because you are a Nephilim. And that basically, he doesn't say it outright, but if you're not a Christian, you're one of Lilith's children. I did not like it. I'm glad I have it because, you know, I want everything that I can Lilith book-wise. But if you do not want to just collect them all, don't get this book. Did not resonate with one thing in it as a positive. It was very judgmental, in my opinion. I liked every other book, some less than others. This is the only book of these that I would tell you I really despised. So I'm not holding back how I feel about this. Okay, the last group are books that have her in it, but she's not the only topic, but she's quite a bit in it. I could bring Jewish Midrash, I could bring the Zohar, I could bring a whole bunch of source material. I didn't, because those are to me, a little bit like read some, if you haven't done a lot of research on her, do that first and then go read these. Because like finding Lilith in the Zohar, she's sprinkled throughout it, but you got to sort of dig to find her. Midrash is the same way. Midrash is on everything that's in the Bible, in the Torah and beyond. And so you have to sort of search. So a lot of these books will give you the references instead of going and looking it up yourself. I usually, the only time I deal with Lilith and Zohar is either if I'm reading along, doing a study and I come to her, or I'm doing something and a book points me to her. Because you can't just open it up and go, oh, here's Lilith. You have to know where to go.
She'll show up.
So the first one, which is an amazing book, is called The Hebrew Goddess by Raphael Pattay. This book is one of the most scholarly books on Hebrew goddesses and divine feminine. He covers everything from a Shirab when the Jewish people were not monotheists, through Lilith, all the way to Shekinah, God's presence and power, through Kabbalah. I mean, he covers everything about from the prehistory to modern times of the divine feminine in Judaism. Excellent book, and lots of really good information on Lilith.
Amazing book. I have to have.
It's one of my absolute favorites. It's a little dry from the standpoint of it's more scholarly, but he does a good job of not making it read like a textbook.
And it makes you realize that the goddess is in Judaism the whole time.
And Christianity, and the church doesn't
even know it.
No, because the Holy Spirit is Shekinah, which is the divine mother.
Yeah.
So really great book. This is one I recommend. Top of the list. I, in fact, would recommend this before my own book.
It would help your book be better understood.
It really would. I know this is a favorite of Brandon's. I don't know if it is also James. And it's Nux Omnia, Feminine Deities by the Left-Hand Path by Edgar Kerbel and other authors. It's not just about Lilith. It's all dark feminine, but really well done.
Yeah, I think it's really good. It was like you were saying, if you don't want to go dig through the Zohar and you want to just get bits and pieces of the information, it's a great little reference, quickish.
It is. Very well done. And some really good authors. Isn't
Packetay's in there.
Pattay is in there.
Packetay's in there.
A Yemia, a dark Yemia is in there. Kurakula is in there.
Yeah, really good. Really, really, really well done. Does Humberto?
Yeah, Humberto's Kabbalistic Lilith is the section that Lilith is in.
Humberto Magi, who's from Brazil, awesome author. His wife is Veronica Rivas. She's written on Pampagira, so is he. He's definitely a Kabbalist. They're also she's a Buddhist, very good, knowledgeable Buddhist. And they do a whole bunch of different stuff. Really love their work. So this is really well done. This is one that I really love. It's called She. Primal Musings with the Dark Goddess by Storm Constantine and Andrew Collins. And the interesting thing there is Storm Constantine was a fiction writer. She passed away. She wrote a whole bunch of science fiction, fantasy, really alternative type stuff that's excellent. So I recommend her fiction. She's also a mystic. And then Andrew Collins writes historical or alternative archaeology type stuff. Like he has a book on Göbekli Tepe that was found in Turkey, and digging into some of the symbolism there. He has a book called Ashes of Angels, which is about the Anunnaki and the Watchers, and how he proposes there's this like group of people that were holding a lot of the mysteries. Doesn't propose exactly where they came from, but this idea that they were around longer than most of what we think in history, just really good. But She is a bunch of dark goddess stuff, just like the last one. Lilith is one of them, Hecate is one. I mean, it goes on and on, the same kind of stuff, and very well done. Stories about each of them, information and some experiential stuff, and there's some really cool artwork. So really, really well done. Love that book too. This one is really good too. This is another one by Damon Barzee. It's called Unholy Goddesses of the Dark Side. And this is, again, like Medusa, Hecate, Lilith, all of the dark goddesses again. So similar to these last ones. Really like these because they tend to not go overboard. They're not very, I mean, there is obviously scholarship, but they're not citing 100 different papyrus, and they just sort of get to the point. And so they're very quick, good reads. Excuse me. Now, this is going to be very different. So St. Mary Magdalene, the Gnostic tradition of the Holy Bride by Tal Malachi. This is a book based on a Gnostic tradition. And the focus of this book is Mary Magdalene. This group is based in the Valentinian Gnostic tradition, which is a little more open than the Sethian. And Mary Magdalene, to all Gnostics, is considered an enlightened being. If they do Kabbalah, they see her as the bride, which is a participant of God. And in this tradition that Tal Malachi teaches, Mary Magdalene is the reincarnation of Eve. And then Lilith comes to save her, not knowing who she's the reincarnation of. And they join together as one being and become the sort of the fulfillment of divine feminine. And that's how Mary Magdalene becomes enlightened, because she's this dark and light balance that's come completely imbalanced. There's short things about Mary Magdalene and Lilith, and then there's a Gnostic gospel of sayings at the end, some of which is very Lilithian. So couldn't leave that out. This next one's going to be a little bit maybe controversial because of who it's about. So it's Luciferic's Compendium. And right now there's, around the whole Luciferian thing, there was some murders, and there's a group of people, not these books, but there's a group of authors that were involved with some of this, and it ended up, they're tied to it and such. So Luciferics, and what was the name they used? Lucifuge.
Raphael.
And so this one's going to be a little tough because of that. But the reason I mention it is there is a lot of good information on Lilith in this book. It's by Barzee, Parzhuph. And there's a lot of other stuff, but there's a lot, about half the book is on Lilith. Again, Luciferian, dark tree. The next one is, you'll probably remember Ball Codman earlier on the Lilith book that I thought was too short. Well, he's got another book that's more recent called Devils, Demons, and Ghosts in the Hebrew Tradition, romancing the Sitra Hara. And I'll tell you, it's really well done. It's not just Lilith, but she is in here, and he does a really good job of explaining the Sitra Hara, which is, of course, or they call it Sitra Achra, depending on your Hebrew, but it's basically the dark side. And he goes into explaining why it's not as dark as people make it out to be, and why it's a balance for the light. But Lilith is in here, much bigger book than his Lilith book. And really well done.
And it will clue you into a lot of mysticism.
Yes. He always does. So this next one, I actually didn't take serious at first because it's called The Vampire's Bible. And I was a little bit like, okay, but somebody recommended it, so I got it. It's based on the idea of, people that believe they're vampires. I'm not questioning that. There's different kinds of people that identify as vampires. Some are more mystical, some are more what you expect based on pop culture. But this is definitely more from a mystical perspective. And with this, the mythology they have put together is that Lilith is the mother spiritually, not like the role-playing game side where she's the physical mother, but the spiritual mother of the vampiric current. The thing I really like about it is they don't take themselves super seriously. They put a lot of artwork in it that is actually sort of funny. That one's not, but like, they have Wesley Adams and stuff. So they don't take it too seriously. But they do definitely have a perspective, and it's a lot better than I expected. I actually enjoyed reading it and got good information out of it. So that is all of the Lilith books I have at the moment. As I said, there are others that have Lilith in them, but she's only mentioned very briefly. And I also have ones where she is maybe mentioned, but it's not really Lilith from, or it's called Lilith, but it's really not about the Lilith we are talking about. So, any questions or anything about any of the books I presented? Or anything else about Lilith or okay, so I do want to say we are recording this, so I will put it up on the YouTube channel so you can go back and get the names of books and such. Since I know I went through it fast because I had 52 to go through. The other thing I did want to mention is I do have a second book. Of course, Embracing Lilith was my first. I do have a second book in edit right now, taking forever, but it is going to be called Embodying Lilith. A Gnostic Kabbalah of Lilith. And it's basically it goes through all of the Tree of Life and the Tree of Shadows with aspects of Lilith. It's got some working up to that in the first section, then each of the spheres of both the bright and the dark, and then the paths, the Netavit, which are the major arcana of the tarot. And I link all of those to Lilith. The book is extremely heavy in practice and magic also. It's about, this is pre-edit, so who knows? It's either going to get bigger or smaller, probably both. Some will go away and some will be added, but it's about 280 pages right now. So we'll see where that ends up.
Nice.
Okay, well, thank you. I'm going to, because I think we've gone pretty long, I would think. So I'll close it out. I will save the file, and as soon as I can, I'll upload it. So thank you so much for joining, and hopefully you learned a little bit about Lilith books. Thank you.